Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. This week we are continuing our discussion of Season 8 in The Mind of Evil. We will be discussing the Doctor, the companions, and the villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We would also love to hear your thoughts on this story. So to join the discussion, you can check us out at Time Team, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Now, Paddy, I will hand over to you for our story recap, please.
Thank you very much. At Stangmore Prison, a converted medieval fortress, prisoner George Patrick Barnum is being taken away for his sentence to be carried out. He tries to fight off the guards, but to no avail, and his fellow prisoners cause a cacophony to show their support, leading the spectators for the sentencing to believe that a riot is ensuing. Amongst the spectators are the Doctor and Joe, who have come out due to the Doctor's curiosity at the process that is about to take place, which he calls the Keller method. The prison governor appears and introduces Professor Kettering, an associate of the Professor Keller who invented the process. He informs those in attendance that this method is based on the concept of elimination of negative mental impulses in order to recondition criminals into law-abiding citizens. Dealing with the Doctor's frequent interruptions and snide remarks, he tells everyone that the negative impulses are then stored in a specialized machine. A heavily sedated Barnum is then wheeled in as Kettering says that the process has been very successful in its test runs, and this will be the first public demonstration of the process. The process begins, but Barnum screams out in agony as the machine seemingly malfunctions. Kettering just tries to play it off as a minor issue, but the Doctor demands to know what happened and fobs off his poor explanation of the machine failure. The Governor introduces the Doctor and his rolled-in unit, with the Doctor saying that the Keller machine is exactly the sort of thing unit was created to stop. Kettering goes to the infirmary and gets an update on Barnum from the hospital physician, Dr. Summers. He says that Barnum seems to be alright physically, but he is then called to attend an incident in the room where the experiment took place. Kettering follows him and they are joined by the Governor, Joe, and the Doctor, and he confirms that the victim on the floor is dead. Kettering says that it might be a heart attack as a result of watching the experiment, but the Doctor dismisses the idea and asks Summers to do a post-mortem and check the previous medical records. Joe says that the man looked terrified and that his neck is covered in what appears to be tiny bites and scratches. The Doctor suggests that he should call the Brigadier, but Joe reminds him that he is overseeing the security arrangements for the world's first global peace conference. At Unit HQ, the Brigadier informs Yates that they have been tasked with escorting a missile for disassembly, and he wants Yates in charge of the escort convoy. They are suddenly interrupted by Captain Chen Li, who is a representative of the delegation from the People's Republic of China. She says that the important documents have been stolen from the room of General Cheng Tek, the head of the delegation, and she accuses the unit guards of letting someone into the room. The Brigadier swallows his anger at the insult and promises to investigate the situation and arrest whoever is responsible. Chen Li leaves but warns that if there is any more issues, then her delegation will withdraw from the conference. She then makes her way into a nearby park and in a trance-like state burns the stolen documents. Before she leaves, she touches a small metal stud at the base of her skull. In the process room, the Doctor and Kettering argue about the Keller process, but stop when Summers arrives and says that the victim did die of heart failure, but says that he had no history of heart disease or anything else that would have contributed to an attack. Summers does point out that he had a fear of small animals, which the Doctor correctly assumes to be rats. The Governor says that the prison is free of rats, but Summers says that the evidence speaks for itself. Kettering still tries to label the death as simple heart failure, but the Doctor insists it has something to do with the Keller machine, growing angry when Kettering insults his scientific capabilities and storms off. Joe follows on, pleading with the Governor to listen to the Doctor, and he agrees and gets Kettering to do a complete examination of the Keller machine. Kettering begins to start his examination when the machine starts to flicker into life. He grabs his head in pain and he suddenly imagines himself in the middle of the sea and begins to act as if he is drowning before collapsing to the floor dead. Summers examines the body and informs the Governor and the recently returned Doctor and Joe that all signs indicate that he died by drowning. He goes to check Kettering's medical records and confirms that he had only been dead for about 5 minutes, which seems to have coincided with another cacophony from the prisoners. The Doctor pleads with the Governor to have the Keller machine destroyed as he thinks it is responsible, but the Governor says that he needs to submit the request to the Home Office first, leading the Doctor to wonder how many more will die in the meantime. At Unit HQ, the Brigadier is informing Yates that the comprehensive search has not found the missing papers when a call comes through from Chen Li. She informs him that General Cheng Tek is dead, and the Brigadier makes his way to their room. Once they arrive, Chen Li demands that immediate action be taken, but confirms that no one else is aware of the death. The Brigadier tells Yates to get a report on all comings and goings to the room, and instructs him to call the Doctor and Joe back from the prison. He then questions Chen Li about her finding the body, and she says that she called him immediately after discovering it when she arrived for a meeting with the general. Thinking she is hiding something, the brigadier gives an order for the time of the call to be verified. After a short while, he questions Chin Li about why she is lying, as her call was recorded as being logged nearly half an hour after she supposedly found the body. At the prison, the governor says that for the time being, he can only seal off the processing room until he gets further instructions, but he allows the doctor to examine the machine for himself. Before he leaves, the doctor asks if Keller installed the machine himself, and the governor replies that he was helped by his female Chinese assistant. Joe leaves to visit Summers, who is dealing with the recently awakened and confused Barnum. Summers confirms that Kettering had water in his lungs and died of drowning. Meanwhile, in the process room, the Keller machine activates again, heralding another noise riot from the prisoners, and the doctor recoils in pain as he sees himself surrounded by fire. Episode 2. Joe rushes into the room and manages to bring the doctor out of the illusion. The terrified doctor takes a while to come back to his senses and tells Joe her arrival interfered with the Keller machine's assault on him. The doctor reveals that the illusion he saw was based on his experience watching the parallel Earth burn. He then says that the Keller machine convinces the brain that what it is experiencing is in fact reality, and the body reacts accordingly. Joe asks why they can't simply destroy the machine, but the doctor says that the Home Office would prefer to control it rather than get rid of it. Still rattled from the encounter, the doctor tells Joe to leave, but before she can go, Yates arrives and tells the doctor he needs to go with him to the Brigadier. The doctor refuses to leave and applies a Venusian karate technique to Yates when he tries to force him to leave. Yates informs him of the murder and the doctor agrees to go, but orders Joe to go to the governor and have him seal the processing room. Back in London, Benton is observing Chen Li as she uses a public call box, but she notices him and mentally assaults him with the power channelized from the Keller machine through the metal stud on her neck. Benton collapses to the ground, but by the time he comes to and is helped by a passerby, she has fled the scene. He reports to the Brigadier, who dismisses him before Yates and the doctor arrive. Yates too is dismissed after the doctor comments on the Brigadier's mood, leading the doctor to ask for a complete rundown on the situation. After receiving all the information, the doctor agrees to help in the investigation in return for the Brigadier's assistance in dealing with the Keller machine. They then depart to meet the new Chinese delegate, Mr. Fu Peng. Meanwhile outside, the Master, disguised as a telecom repairman, has tapped into the secure phone line in Unit HQ and listens in as Yates discusses the guard detail for the missile convoy. He then changes into a suit and gets into a nearby waiting car. While he is listening, he notices the doctor and the Brigadier leave. They arrive at Fu Peng's room and the doctor greets him in his native Hokkien dialect, having guessed his origin from his name. Fu Peng returns the greeting before switching to English, and the doctor further ingratiates himself by mentioning a close friendship with Mao Zedong, the chairman of the People's Republic of China, and Fu Peng invites him to take tea with him, leaving the Brigadier to wait behind. Growing impatient, the Brigadier tries to discuss the murder with Fu Peng, but he ignores him and instead asks the doctor to dine with him later that evening. The doctor agrees and he departs with the exasperated Brigadier. Back at the prison, Joe goes to visit Summers and gets a checkup on Barnum. Barnum reveals that he's been having memory issues since the process, but he seems to exhibit none of the aggressive attitude he previously showed before undergoing the Keller method. Summers confides in her that he thinks the machine overcorrected on him and has reduced him to a near simpleton. Meanwhile, at the holding cell where Barnum was before being moved to the process room, one of the prisoners is being supervised as he cleans the room. Another noise riot from the other prisoners draws the guards away, and the cleaner places a gun underneath one of the pillows. The guard returns, and the cleaner finishes just as a new prisoner, Mailer, is brought in, accompanied by other guards and the governor. Mailer smugly states that he won't be subjected to the treatment process, and once he is left alone with the two remaining guards, he surreptitiously checks for the gun whilst they play chess to pass the time. After a while, another guard enters with a tray of tea, and Mailer takes him hostage with the gun. He takes the rest of the guards prisoner, and he releases his fellow inmates, who he instructs to find as many hostages as possible. He and Vosper, the prisoner who left the gun for him, find Joe and Summers in the medical wing and take them hostage. At Unit HQ, the doctor suggests that the death of General Cheng Tek is linked with the Keller machine, citing the similarities between it and the other deaths. Yates then enters with papers for the Brigadier to sign in relation to the convoy mission, and he explains to the doctor that the missile's warhead contains an incredibly deadly nerve gas, which has been outlawed by the UN and is to be buried at sea. The Brigadier notices that Benton is on the escort detail and jokingly tells Yates that he might lose the missile as he did Chen Li. The doctor overhears this, and after a brief explanation, he realizes that she is the assistant that installed the Keller machine at the prison. The Brigadier suggests that it could be a coincidence, but the doctor insists an alert be put out for her. At that time, Chen Li has arrived at the Master's car, where he reasserts his mental control over her and orders her to kill the American delegate. Inside Unit HQ, the Doctor is trying to contact the prison, but is unable to be connected due to the phone lines going down. The Brigadier then gets a call informing him that Chen Li was seen entering Fu Peng's room. In the room, Chen Li places a call through to the Senator Alcott, the American delegate, and says that Fu Peng wishes to meet him alone to discuss a mutually beneficial secret, and she then hides as he enters the room. Once he enters the room fully, she tells him to take a seat and turns off the lights before assaulting him with the power of the Keller machine, forcing him to see a Chinese dragon attacking him. Episode 3. Alcott begs the advancing dragon to stay away, but he collapses to the ground, clawing at his own face. The Doctor suddenly enters the room, followed by Fu Peng and the Brigadier, who attempts to shoot the dragon, which they can also see. The Doctor pushes his arm away as he fires and calls out something in Mandarin, which causes the illusion to vanish and Chen Li to fall to the ground unconscious. The Doctor informs the others that they were all caught in a mass hallucination, and he goes to check on Chen Li and Alcott, who is alive but in a state of deep shock. Fu Peng then shows him the stud on her neck, and the Doctor says it is a telepathic amplifier, which is most likely connected to the Keller machine. The Doctor tells Fu Peng that someone was using Chen Li as a pawn in order to start another world war. He tasks the Doctor with finding whoever is responsible, and then leaves to inform the embassy about the recent events. Chen Li starts to come to, and the Doctor speaks to her in her native Cantonese to gain her trust. He then asks her about Keller and her trip to the prison with him. Back at the prison, Joe and Summers have been placed in an isolation cell, and when Mailer and Vosper return, Summers attacks them in an escape attempt, but Mailer hits him with the pistol. The riot has damaged the phone lines, and he tells Summers that he will carry a message from Mailer to the governor. He refuses to leave without Joe, but she says that she will be alright, and she is left in the cell on her own. The Doctor and Chen Li return to Unit HQ in the morning and find the Brigadier asleep in his office. Before they can discuss anything, Yates calls in and says that the escort convoy is experiencing a delay due to the loading of the missile. Unbeknownst to them, the Master is listening in on their conversation, and he seems alarmed when the Brigadier mentions that Chen Li is with him and that they are discussing the Keller machine. He tells his driver to head for the prison as the Brigadier hangs up the call. Chen Li tells him that she met Keller at an embassy function, and she agreed to accompany him to Stangmore as prison reform was one of her government's highest priorities. However, she is unable to remember what happened at the prison or any of her other meetings with Keller. The Doctor then realizes that Keller is the Master. At the prison, Mailer has the captured guards and Joe brought into the main hallway. In the governor's office, Summers begs for him to negotiate with Mailer, but he refuses, saying that more innocent people would die if Mailer and the others were released. The chief guard calls the Brigadier and informs him of the riot and the capture of Joe, which perturbs the Doctor. In the prison hallway, a confused Barnum arrives and requests to see Summers, but Mailer tells Vosper to take him away. Joe kicks Mailer's hand holding the gun, causing it to go off and hit one of the prisoners. She then grabs the gun and holds Vosper at bay as the captured guards fight back against the prisoners. More prison guards and the governor rush in and take control of the situation, and Joe gives Mailer back over to them. Later, the Master arrives and meets with the governor, and he assures him that he can fix the machine, but asks to see Mailer before they go into the processing room. He is escorted to the holding cell, and once he is left alone with Mailer, he offers to help him take control of the prison again, and opens his suitcase to reveal gas bombs, masks, and guns. He tells them to ensure that once they've taken control of the prison, that it looks completely normal so as not to arouse the Doctor's suspicion when he arrives. The Master then calls for the guards to open the cell, and they launch an attack using the gas bombs. The governor tries to sound the alarm, but Mailer shoots him and the guards that come to his aid. The Master disables the phone lines and switches off the alarm. In the medical wing, Vosper captures Joe, Summers, and Barnum. Sometime later, the Doctor arrives at the prison, but he is captured by Mailer and brought to see the Master. The Doctor tries to threaten him if he discovers Joe has been harmed, but the Master pulls a gun on him and says he will shoot him in both of his hearts if he tries anything. He then tells the Doctor that he requires some assistance dealing with the Keller machine, which seems to be exhibiting the beginnings of independent thought. He also reveals that he intends to steal the missile being transported with units so he can launch it at the peace conference, thereby starting another world war. The Doctor then causes a distraction by flipping over the desk, allowing him to escape. He flees into the courtyard and manages to avoid the gunfire from the prisoners in the guard towers, and he makes his way back into the main part of the prison. He hears Joe and Summer call for him, but he encounters Mailer, who chases him towards the processing room, where he finds the Master waiting for him. The Master tells him to tie the Doctor to the chair and then to leave once he is done. The Master explains that he has fixed the Keller machine and wants to see how long the Doctor can resist its power. He attaches the control stick to him, saying that the effects can be reversed to affect the wearer. He then leaves and seals the door behind him. The machine starts up, and the Doctor is plagued with visions of the fire that could consume the parallel Earth, as well as images of Daleks, Cybermen, Zarbi, Sensorites, War Machines, and Ice Warriors. Episode 4. The doctor passes out from the strain, but the power of the killer machine has started to affect the prisoners as well. The master, also starting to feel the effects of the machine, unseals the door and manages to shut off the machine. He checks on the doctor and seems to be relieved when he discovers that he is still alive, and he brings it back around. The doctor admits that the machine is too strong for him or anyone else to resist, but the master insists that their Time Lord biology will allow them to control it. The doctor says that whatever entity is inside the machine is growing stronger and will be able to overcome them soon. The master then calls Mailer in and tells him to take the doctor to the cell where Jo is now being held on her own after Summers was taken away. He says that if the doctor does not help him, then Jo will be the next person tested on the machine. The weakened doctor tries to escape but is no good, and Mailer pistol whips him and then shoves him into Jo's cell. Jo is shocked to see the master, who tells her that it would be in her best interest to convince the doctor to help him. He then leaves and gives Vosper and Mailer instructions to clear B wing of the prison and keep the trap duo under constant guard. The master then goes back to the processing room where the machine starts to use its power on him. He tries to resist and bend the creature within it. He tries to resist and bend the creature within it back to his will, but to no avail, and he is presented with his greatest fear, the doctor towering over him and laughing. He flees the room and seals it behind him, telling the creature that he will starve it into submission. Back in the holding cell, Summers is brought to attend to the unconscious doctor, and he tells Jo that he is in a coma due to the mental and physical trauma he's just experienced. He gives her medicine for him, but after he leaves, the doctor wakes up and says that he just needs to rest, and the medicine would probably kill him due to his alien metabolism. He then falls unconscious again, leaving Jo alone once more. Meanwhile, the master orders Mailer to make sure that no one enters the processing room, but Mailer wants to know why they just don't leave the prison. The master says that a mass breakout of prisoners would lead to a massive manhunt that could lead to the rearrests or deaths of the prisoners, and instead he shows him his plans to capture the missile, which he will then use to blackmail the world's powers into giving him whatever he wants. The following morning, Jo demands that she and the doctor be given food, and once Vosper goes to fulfill the demand, the doctor wakes up and tells the delighted Jo that they need to escape. A short while later, the food arrives, and together the doctor and Jo manage to overcome the guards and lock them into the cell. They then take refuge in the governor's office and come across the plans for the missile theft. At that moment, the missile convoy is ambushed by Mailer and a group of the prisoners. Yates gets off the road and tries to call for reinforcements, but gets wounded and then watches as the prisoner make off with the missile. He struggles back to the road and takes one of his men's abandoned motorcycles and takes off in pursuit. Unbeknownst to him, his attempts to contact the unit HQ are reported to the brigadier, who figures out the convoy position and then prepares to go there via helicopter. Yates follows the prisoners to an abandoned airfield and watches discreetly as they unload the missile. However, his presence is detected, and as he tries to flee, his motorcycle is shot out from underneath him and he gets knocked unconscious when he hits the ground and is then taken prisoner. Meanwhile, the brigadier and a platoon of men have arrived at the convoy site, and one of the medics tends to the wounded Benton, who tells him about seeing a police van before being knocked unconscious. The brigadier, acting on a hunch, looks at the map and sees that the prison is not too far away. Back in the prison, Jo urges the doctor to leave in case they get caught, but he says that they are safe where they are, as it's the last place the prisoners would think to look. He then fills her in on the creature in the machine, calling the parasite as old as time itself. Jo then brings his attention to the master leaving, and he says that it is their best opportunity to destroy the machine. Meanwhile, the machine has gained the ability to teleport, and it appears in the main hallway where it attacks a prisoner searching for the doctor and Jo and kills him. It then teleports away again before the doctor and Jo arrive to discover the body. The doctor realizes that the machine can now move itself, and he rushes to the processing room, but they are caught by Mailer and Vosper. The machine suddenly appears again and kills Vosper, and then moves back to its original position, where it begins to affect the doctor, Jo, and Mailer. Episode 5. Mailer fires at the machine as he flees from the room, and the machine suddenly teleports away again, leading the doctor to theorize that Mailer is the preferred target due to his innate evil nature. They exit the room and come across a still confused Barnum, who says that he has been searching for Jo, and he follows on after them as they go and try to stop the master from using the missile. Meanwhile, the brigadier is scouting the prison in a helicopter, and he radios back to the base that everything seems to be okay, but he's suspicious that it seems to be too quiet. The doctor and Jo spot the helicopter and start to go into the yard to signal it, but they are called back in by a rifle-wielding prisoner. Barnum, not knowing his own strength due to his childlike demeanour, demands that the prisoner not hurt him as he starts to strangle him with the rifle. The doctor intervenes and stops him from killing the prisoner as others arrive and then take them away. Meanwhile, the master calls Mailer from the airfield housing the missile, and he begins to berate him for leaving Yates alive, but Mailer cuts across him and informs him about the rampaging machine. He demands that he return to the prison to deal with it, or all the prisoners will flee, and if any of them are caught, then they will readily give away the mission's location. Left with little choice, the master agrees to come back, and once he is off the phone, he tells Yates that he can stop pretending to be unconscious. He tells him that he intends to use the missile and that the only reason Yates is alive is so that he can be used as a hostage if UNIT finds him before he is ready. The doctor and Joe are brought into the governor's office to meet Mailer, but he refuses to let Barnum in, referring to him as a zombie. The doctor asks him why he's assisting the master, and Mailer says that it is a mutually beneficial agreement. Joe says that he's just being used by the master, but the doctor can't offer him anything to change his allegiance, and so they are taken away back to the cells. Meanwhile, the brigadier has returned to the HQ and tells one of his subordinates, Major Cosworth, that he believes the missile to be in the prison due to the evidence gathered from the ambush site and his spotting the doctor and Joe when they signaled him. Cosworth says that he will begin to draw up a plan of attack, but the brigadier replies that the prison is too well fortified, given its original purpose. Cosworth suggests that there could be an underground passage into it, and the two of them start to draft up a plan to infiltrate the prison. As they are doing this, they are informed of the master's return to the prison by one of their observation teams. They eventually come up with a plan, but before they set off, Benton arrives and requests to be assigned to the mission, having checked himself out of the infirmary to be able to do so. The brigadier agrees, impressed by Benton's tenacity, but sadly informs him that there is no word on Yates. As they are speaking, Yates has actually managed to free himself from the chair as he was tied to and disarms the prisoner guarding him. The master visits the doctor and Joe, who ignore him until they finish their game of drafts, which Joe wins. The master again asks him to help control the machine and threatens to have Mailer kill Joe if he doesn't. Left with no choice, the doctor agrees to try and at least inhibit the machine's ability to teleport. The two Time Lords then make their way to the processing room, with Joel being left behind in the cell. The doctor uses equipment from the prison's workshop storeroom and rigs up an electrical coil to a rudimentary pulse wave emitter, which he says should mimic a human brainwave and thereby distract the machine from teleporting again. The doctor carefully makes his way into the processing room, and the machine starts up again and starts to attack him. Again, he is plagued with visions of his former adversaries as he attempts to place the electrical coil, which starts smoking and sparking from the strain, around it. He successfully places it around the machine, and the master turns on the pulse wave emitter to its highest setting, and after a few tense moments, the machine powers down. The doctor says it is a temporary measure at best, as the machine is continually learning. The master says that he will have time to figure out how to control it permanently, and orders Mailer to escort him back to the cell. Once there, he rests in order to be able to regain his strength, and regales Joe as they share the remnants of their breakfast with the tale of how he met Sir Walter Raleigh in the Tower of London during the reign of Elizabeth I. Outside the prison, the brigadier, disguised as a delivery man, drives a supply truck up to the main gate, and while he distracts the guards, members of the assault team disembark and knock out the guards after the gates have been opened to allow the van in. Meanwhile, Benton's team has successfully snuck into the prison through the underground tunnel, and a vicious firefight breaks out as the unit forces take control of the prison. Inside, Mailer takes the doctor and Joe hostage in an attempt to use them as bargaining chips. Joe tries to cause a distraction for the doctor to disarm him, but Mailer is too quick and informs the doctor that he only needs one of them alive as he points his gun at him. Episode 6. As Mailer prepares to kill the doctor, the brigadier arrives and shoots him. The doctor thanks him, but wishes that he couldn't cut it as close from now on. Benton arrives and says that the master is not in the prison grounds, and the doctor reveals that the missile is not there either. The master has actually gone to the airfield, where he oversees the missile's launch preparations. The brigadier takes the others to the governor's office, and they start trying to figure out how to find the master and the missile. Benton arrives and brings Barnum with him, saying that he found him locked in the medical bay. The brigadier tells Benton to lock him up with the other prisoners, but Joe interjects and tells him to stay in the office while she goes to get him something to eat. The doctor tells the brigadier about what happened to Barnum and that he'll be fine with Joe looking after him. They suddenly get a radio message from Yates, who has returned to the mobile HQ, and he tells them about the missile's location. The brigadier places Benton in charge of the prison whilst he goes to join the rest of his men for an assault on the airfield. The doctor warns him to be careful of the master, but elects to stay in the prison in order to try and destroy the machine. At that time, the machine destroys the processing room as it burns out the inhibitor coil and teleports into the main hallway, where it kills two of the guards. Joe returns to the governor's office with food for Barnum and goes with the doctor to deal with the machine. Summers calls through to Benton to ask for an update on the medical supplies, and Barnum tries to speak to him on the phone, but Benton tells him to go to speak to whoever he wants, and with his childlike understanding, Barnum makes his way towards the medical bay. Down in the main hall, the doctor and Joe discover the damage caused by the machine. The machine suddenly ambushes them and starts to assault them, but it stops when Barnum staggers in, his proximity to it seemingly nullifying its effects. Barnum becomes fearful of the room, saying that he remembers something bad happening there, and he attempts to flee, but he is stopped by the doctor, who forces him back into the machine in order to stop it again. He then gets a chair for him, and he tells Joe that the machine feeds on the negative impulses in the brain, but Barnum has none left, and is therefore a perfect shield against the machine. The doctor opens the machine and sees the tumor-like parasitical entity inside it. Joe asks if they can destroy it, but the doctor says that it is nearly invulnerable and will require tremendous force to kill it. He goes to see Benton, leaving Joe to look after the scared Barnum, but he reassures him that he will be back as soon as he can. Summers then comes looking for Barnum, and he tries to take him away, not giving Joe a chance to explain things. The creature starts to attack them once Barnum is far enough away, but Joe brings him back and informs Summers what will happen if Barnum goes too far away. Summers reluctantly goes back to the medical bay and tells Barnum to listen to Joe. Meanwhile, the doctor meets Benton and gets him to requisition some equipment and a power supply. Suddenly, the phone rings with the master on the other end, who realizes that the tables have been turned against him. The doctor tries to convince him not to continue with his plans to use the missile, but the master refuses. The doctor then offers to give him back the dematerialization circuit for his TARDIS in exchange for the missile, and after a few moments, the master agrees. He tells the doctor to call him alone, and if he sees anyone from Unit trying to interfere, he will launch the missile. The Brigadier arrives at the mobile HQ, where he is greeted by recovering Yates and Cosworth, who tells him that the missile actually has a failsafe in the form of a remote abort function that would blow it up. The doctor then calls and informs him about the deal with the master, and the Brigadier agrees to call off the assault on the airfield. However, his attitude causes the doctor concern, but he doesn't reveal anything about the abort function. The Brigadier then hangs up and tells Cosworth to call the missile command base and tells Yates to clear a 10-mile radius around the airfield. Unbeknownst to them, though, the master has discovered the abort switch and disables it. The doctor goes to the processing room and informs Joe of the deal he made, which he says is just as dangerous as it would mean the master being free to cause havoc throughout all of time and space. Thanks to Joe, though, he comes up with a plan to use Barnum to destroy both the machine and the master once and for all. Barnum picks up the resealed machine and, following the doctor, takes it to the mobile HQ, where they discover the master has disabled the abort mechanism after it failed to blow up. The doctor retrieves the dematerialization circuit that was just delivered, and together with Joe and Barnum hiding in the back of a police van, makes his way towards the airfield. Once there, the doctor distracts the master, allowing Joe and Barnum to sneak out the back of the van with the machine. The doctor then manages to disarm the master and then throws him towards the machine, which starts to attack him. The doctor rushes into the hangar and reconnects the abort mechanism, and Joe radios for a rescue helicopter to come and collect them. They all rush for the helicopter, but Barnum's kindness gets the better of him, and he tries to help the master, who shoves him out of the way so that he can get into the police van. Realizing his error, Barnum tries to stop him, but ends up being run over by the fleeing master. The doctor and Joe go to check on him, and Joe is devastated when the doctor says that he is dead. They then flee in the helicopter and escape before the missile is blown up, destroying the machine in the process. Later in the governor's office, Joe and the doctor mourn over the loss of Barnum. The Brigadier tries to lighten the mood by saying the machine was destroyed and the master is still trapped on Earth, but the doctor discovers that the master actually stole the dematerialization circuit during their struggle. The master then calls, thanking him for his assistance and saying that he will come back one day to destroy them. The master then mocks him over his continued exile, and the doctor laments the fact that the master is now free to do as he wishes, whilst he is forced to remain on Earth with the Brigadier, who smiles at the statement. End of the story. So now that we have that wonderful concept in our head, we're going to go over to the trivia spot. Because like that is a terrifying concept.
Yeah, literally. So, trivia spot for The Mind of Evil. The air date for this story was the 30th of January to the 6th of March 1971. The writer for the story is Don Houghton. This is the second and final story written by Don. We previously discussed his work in Inferno, which makes sense. It was referred to in the story. The director for this story is Timothy Combe. This is the third and final story for Timothy. Previously, we discussed his work in Evil of the Daleks and also in Doctor Who and the Silurians.
Mm-hmm.
Mind of Evil went badly over budget. Thanks in no small part to the helicopter that was real. And so Barry Letts wasn't impressed. Like, I'm sure he was impressed with the outcome, but not impressed with the financial management of the story.
Yeah.
and therefore he took Timothy Combe off his list of directors, and Combe never worked on the program again after that.
Hmm.
The story had the working titles of The Pandora Machine, Man Hours, The Pandora Box, and The Pandora's apostrophe S box. I don't I don't really get the Pandora reference, except maybe that Barnum, they took away all of the evil and all that was left was good. Maybe
Yeah,
it
but
seems a bit.
but wasn't Pandora's box in the sense of like all the bad shit gets out, but like hope remains inside the box.
Yeah, it's like an inverse.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Man hours is also weird. So
Yeah, it has, at least with the mind of evil. Okay, fair enough. Yes, there is a weird evil brain kind of going around.
mm. So viewers will realize, or will viewers will recognize when the Doctor and Fu Peng are speaking that the Doctor is actually subtitled. This is the first and possibly it's the only time in Classic Who this has happened. It maybe hasn't. I don't think it's happened in New Who either, where the Doctor himself has subtitles. We've seen other characters have subtitles,
Hmm.
and particularly we'll see it again in Curse of Fenric and a couple of others where other characters are subtitled, but never the Doctor himself. This is the first and possibly only time we've seen it. Now they are speaking Hokkien,
Hokkien.
Hokkien,
Yeah.
and the reason for that is Pixen Lim, who is also in this, that was the only dialect that she was comfortable teaching John Pertwee. um, you know, obviously John had to come across as being somewhat fluent in the language, and so that was the only one that she was comfortable teaching him
Hmm.
to a level where it would come across okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where like you see the line in there like, oh, my Hokkien is a little bit rusty.
Yeah.
Sort of trying to cover his own ass. The Chinese dragon uh, was nicknamed Puff the Magic Dragon, and the intention was the effect was so bad they just tried to limit it as much as possible. they, they were like, no, this isn't really working. This is one of only 11 Doctor Who stories to not feature the TARDIS. Okay, we had a lot of last season. The TARDIS wasn't there either, though the console was. Is the 11th story not to feature the TARDIS. Hayden Jones was Vosper on
Hmm.
screen, so one of the inmates or whatever. He also did the voice for the Dalek that the Doctor hears when the Calendar Machine is on. The missile.
Yeah.
Now, I watched the Behind the Sofa on the Blu ray collection for this, and they're like, that missile looks really realistic. Like, how did they get it to look realistic? It was a real missile. Apparently, according to the Behind the Sofa thing, Barry actually developed a really good relationship with the army.
Hmm.
It's where a lot of the design for the uniforms came from. They used a lot of army bases and stuff like that, and so they actually managed to get a loan of a real, unprimed. I'm going to have to read this out. Bloodhound 2 SAGW missile from the 36th Heavy Air Defence Regiment out of Horseshoe Barracks in Essex. The Master's men, the sort of 8
Yeah.
army, like undercover army people or
Hmm.
whatever, or the guys in uniform, they were actually 8 Marines that were also loaned out.
Jesus Christ, they really did go over fucking budget.
Yeah, but apparently some of that was Barry. Apparently he'd actually developed a really good relationship
Hmm.
with the army, so they used a lot of army bases for things and stuff like that. I suppose the idea being that like fans want to be in unit. It's a similar thing. Like I was talking to Norm from Mission Log the other day
Hmm.
about Stargate and how Stargate SG-1, the program, was heavily supported by the Air Force.
Hmm.
Obviously, because they wanted people to join the Air Force.
Yeah.
And I think that was a similar thing with this, according to what was on Behind the Sofa. Anyway, that it was very much Barry making those contacts.
But like, am I incorrect in saying like, but you know the exterior shot of Cheyenne Mountain or whatever it's called,
Yeah,
isn't that an actual
yeah,
Air Force facility? Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah. The exterior of Cheyenne Mountain. Like Cheyenne Mountain is actually where NORAD is based.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Hmm.
And the Stargate command is under NORAD.
Mm.
So that is actually a real. You see it in a lot of other movies and stuff as well.
Yeah.
But I think there was a similar case here from what I gathered. A couple of original script shifts. So originally, the Brigadier was going to be captured at Stangmore Prison,
Ooh.
along with the Doctor and Joe, and he had the missile's route changed to enable the Master's men to hijack it. Like the Master hypnotized him.
Mm.
I'm glad we didn't have that because I don't want to see the Brigadier hypnotized.
Yeah. No.
One of the weapons used by the Keller machine was an image of a Gorgon type monster, which the Doctor would destroy by showing its own reflection in a mirror.
Mm.
We've seen a Gorgon before, though.
Yeah.
In
Mine robber.
that's the one. And originally, the script played up the tension between the United States and China. Chin Lee was attempting to frame the American delegate for Chiang Tek's murder. That was the original thing, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I'll get into that in the overall, because like there's a couple of things here like that. Clearly, this is like an actual. They're playing really heavily on the whole yellow peril type stuff that was going on at the time.
Playing a bit, because you do also have the Doctor meeting the new delegate, and that
Yeah,
being
but which is also very weird because like Chairman Mao, though to my understanding, like isn't probably like it seems odd that the Doctor would be friends with him.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know. We'll probably get into that more
yeah.
later on. Also, originally the Keller machine was just going to be that. It's going to be a machine.
Hmm.
That's what it was intended to be. But during the rewrites of the episodes, Terrence Dix kind of realized that there was a number of plot holes and things that were cropping up because the machine seemed to be a self-willed, like sentient thing. So he rewrote bits of it to sort of help make sense with that. So we mentioned some of the characters there: Chin Lee, the delegates for China, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Chinese characters are played by Chinese actors. Thank you, Doctor Who,
Yeah.
for appropriately casting people for roles. Apparently, this is because Timothy Combe hated actors in yellowface. Now, the reason given for why he hated it is because he felt it was unrealistic. I would hope he also hated it because it's like a morally like shit thing to do.
See, because like I think when they like we discussed like brown face in the
Mm.
William Hartnell era,
Mm.
particularly in stuff like the Crusade,
Yeah.
and like while that is also bad,
Mm.
I think when it comes to yellowface, it's an awful lot worse because like obviously there's like physical characteristics that are very different between like
Mm.
Caucasians and Asians and Africans and stuff like that. But like the worst I think is like when they do the stuff with the eyes to give
Yeah.
them like the slanted look, and it's like I hate that. It really,
I
really
think
bothers me.
the one example that everyone sort of refers to is Breakfast at Tiffany's, right?
Well, that's more so the buck teeth,
Yeah.
which is I think more a slant or like a slur on Japanese people. But I think
Mm.
yeah, just there. But no, it's like we'll talk about it when we come to Tans of Wang Chiang. But I also like there's other real shows. I mean, like the show Kung Fu had a Caucasian character playing an Asian role, but I
Mm.
think they put kind of makeup to kind of slant the eye, so that like, there's less of the eye open. Like that kind of shit is like it's just I hate it, you know.
Yeah. No, that's fucked up. Christopher Cum,
Mm-hmm.
Kum. I'm gonna go with Cum.
Yeah.
He played the delegate Fu Peng.
Mm-hmm.
He was cast at the last minute. The original actor, Timothy Combe, thought was unsuitable for the role. Thankfully, Combe had done some acting before. He was also an agent, so he'd done a little bit of acting before, and he could speak the correct dialect needed for the role.
Mm.
Don Houghton, the writer of the story, his wife is Pick Sen Lim, who played Captain Chin Lee. So she was actually in the episode. And apparently she was actually pregnant at the time. And so
Oh.
her costume had to be kind of adjusted slightly to accommodate it. So on to the rest of our cast. So
Mm.
as Dr. Summers, we have Michael Sheard. So we previously saw Michael in the Ark. And we'll see him again in Pyramids of Mars, The Invisible Enemy, Castrovala, and Remembrance of the Daleks. His non-Who credits, I mean, his Admiral Ozzel,
Fuck,
like
that's him.
that's him.
I was like,
It's Scarman, like nice Scarman.
because I was like, who the fuck is he in Pyramids? And it's
He's
like,
nice Scarman.
seriously, like a bit of facial hair completely changes a person's appearance.
Because I was watching it going, he looks very familiar. I think he also filled out a little bit
Yeah.
for the years. But yeah, so he is the nice Scarman
Hmm.
in one of the, should we say it's one of the best episodes of Doctor Who ever made?
Well, it was a we for people. I think we discussed before. We did Pyramids as a test run
Hmm.
for this podcast,
Yeah.
and obviously we're going to like redo it because
Yeah.
we want to show you like the new and improved version of it. But Pyramids is one that I always tell people. This is what if you want to watch a classic Who story, this is one of the ones I always recommend.
It's also Norm from Mission Log. It's his favorite. It's his
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah, I
Doctor
think it was Norm requested that we do that one as a test run, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Norm.
So back to Michael. Michael is Admiral Ozzel from The Empire Strikes Back. He was also in Grange Hill as Mr. Bronson. He's also played Hitler several times, including in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Mhm.
And he's also played Heinrich Himmler, apparently, a number of times.
Jesus Christ, the poor bastard.
It's a weird resume. It's like, I was Admiral Ozzel, a member of the Space Nazis.
Yep.
I have also played Hitler. And one of his, like, chief, like,
someone
advisors.
Someone
like, Jesus.
that's arguably worse than Hitler.
Poor Michael. He's such a lovely actor as well. Michael passed away back in 2005. As Barnum, who I will just say right now, when I wrote my notes, I had to go back over my notes again because I was written his name down as Burnham the whole way down. But I had to go back and change it. So as Barnum, we have Neil McCarthy. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who acting appearances for Neil. We will see him again in The Power of Krull. His non-Who credits include Zulu, Where Eagles Dare, Clash of the Titans, Z-Cars, Armadale Farm, and Who Pays the Fireman. In case some of you are new to Time Traveling Team and you wonder why the hell did she pause for a weird amount of time around Where Eagles Dare, Paddy, would you care to explain?
Where Eagles Dare is a movie I absolutely love. And every time we have someone that has appeared on it, going back as far as Marco Polo with Darren Nesbitt, I just, do a little bit of a shuffle in my chair because I love Where Eagles Dare. It's so, so good. And he's not even in for that long, unfortunately. But he is great. He is the Benton of that movie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And his other movie, Zulu, I have watched. This is going to sound really weird, okay? I watched Zulu when I was a kid. Love it. Great movie. Fantastic. Very factually inaccurate, but it's a great film. When my daughter was born, I was reading a book about the particular conflict that movie is set in. And because I was reading the book, the night my daughter was born, I went home and rather than sleep, I watched Zulu. He's great in it. He's basically a farmer that got bored of his life in Wales and ends up going to join the military, and he just bemoans the fact that you can't have a good farm in any of Zululand. Like he's just like they're examining the grass and all this type of shit, and he bonds with a calf, and it's sad when the calf dies. And I'm spoiling the whole movie. Watch the movie. And Clash of the Titans is again one of the best examples of Ray Harryhausen's stop motion movies. Because it's the whole thing of Medusa and Perseus, and it's such a really good movie. And Neil McCarthy is great in it. He's fantastic in all of those movies.
I need to go a bit more into his IMDb history. Surely this guy has played like Lurch or something. He has such a Lurch face.
He suffered from acromalgy, so it's the thing that distorts your facial muscles.
And now I feel like a dick.
It's
great.
I think it's more so you'd see it a lot of people that suffer from gigantism, like I say, like Andre the Giant or Paul White, the Big Short, and that kind of stuff. Whereas Paul White seems to just from the larger scale of things. Andre the Giant, he had a very distinct face, whereas Neil suffered from it but didn't get the height thing. It's just so his face is very hardened.
Mm.
And I think, again, that's why he plays Calabas in Clash of the Titans, and the makeup really accentuates that
Mm.
because his character is like a monster, essentially.
Okay, I feel like a bit of a dick now, but I didn't know that. So,
But, but
yeah,
the guy that plays Lurch, I think, suffers from it as well. So,
which could be where I got from.
yeah.
Neil passed away in 1985. Lastly, as Mailer, we have William Marlowe. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who acting credits for William. We'll see him again in Revenge of the Cybermen. He's one of the technicians on
Hmm.
the space station. His non-Who credits include EastEnders, The Chief, The Gentle Touch, Breakaway, The Legend of Robin Hood, Z-Cars, and The Avengers. William passed away in 2003.
And we have a ding for Z-Cars. We have a double ding because 2 people are in Z-Cars.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. Thus endeth the trivia. So, we have gone through our story recap. Thank you again, Paddington. We
You're very
have gone
welcome.
through trivia.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is time for our character discussion. So, in this section, we have the Doctor. We have the companions of Joe the Brig, and to, in my opinion, a slightly lesser extent, Yates and Benton.
Yeah.
We have prominent characters who you gave Summers and Barnum.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the villains of the Master, Mailer, and the Machine, or the creature in the machine.
Or as I like to call them, the Collective. Yeah, like we'll get into the extent of Yates and Benton, partially because I think Benton has a lot more to do in this particular story
Yes,
than
he
he
does.
did in the previous story.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so I suppose will we crack on with the Doctor?
Indeed, we shall. So, what do you think of the Doctor this time around?
I feel like the Doctor's attitude in this story should have
Mm.
been the attitude he had in the last story.
Okay.
So we finally realize the severity of the Master being let loose in the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
We actually see him have a good relationship with Joe. They're very pally in it, which is great.
Mm.
Like to the extent of when they play drafts in the room and Joe wins, he's like, well, it's a simple game anyway. Like he just throws a little bit like kind of a half-hearted strop. But it's great to actually see them have that relationship. It's great to see them actually be friends.
Mm.
Also, like we talked about last week, where he seemed very cavalier to the fact that fucking a lot of people had died, as well as an innocent man being killed.
Mm.
Here, his line about also being impacted by Barnum's death, because it's Joe is very devastated over it, and he's like, well, how do you think it affects me as well? I'm like, that's what I was fucking missing from last week. That's the Doctor that actually cares about shit. Like, thank you for fucking turning up. I think he does. He hams up, as I said last week. He kind of hams up the torture thing. Now, I have a question for you. Did you watch this in black and white or in color?
I have the DVD, so I watched it in color.
Okay,
The DVD. So, for context, people, the color tapes of this were lost. So it was a missing, but not really missing story. They had the black and white ones.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the DVD, it's been completely recolorized.
Yeah.
So there is no black and white on the DVD
or
on the Blu-ray.
I have an older version, so I have the black and white. So that's why some of the past enemies were very hard to make out. I'm surprised they picked in the Sensorites, because I wouldn't really classify the Sensorites as a whole as a baddie.
No,
yeah, it was like 3 of them. But I just think this was a much better showing for the Doctor this time around. Very curious that again he is maybe at the time, because I'm just trying to see like when he died, like when Mao Zedong died, because if he was still alive at that stage, and he died like 5 years later, but he had a lot of bad shit under his belt, so like I'm kind of surprised that the Doctor would say like he has a very close personal relationship with this guy. Yeah, but it's actually that's going to be something that I'll probably comment on as we go on, in terms of cultural heroes versus the people that from other cultures that would vilify that individual. You know?
Yeah, and I wonder if that's kind of what they were trying to go for here. That like from like the person the doctor was speaking to,
Hmm.
from his perspective,
Yeah. Oh, he's an
being a
actual,
close friend of Chairman Mao,
yeah,
that's
national
amazing.
hero. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, uh,
So maybe that's what they were trying to do,
possibly
or like it was the doctor just sort of
schmoozing.
play acting. But I
Yeah.
don't know if he. I didn't come across that he was play acting.
No. See, I think I was just so happy with how the Doctor was this time around compared to last week that maybe any other major negatives I didn't really focus on a whole lot,
Hmm.
or they just didn't stand out to me. But I enjoyed him this time around.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view.
Okay.
There were still a lot of things in this that bothered me. I think he was better than last week.
Mm-hmm.
But then I remembered that this week is 6 episodes and last week was 4.
Ooh, I did not like him hurting Barnum.
Yeah, so
Uh,
there's a few things here that I didn't like, right? So his comments. Okay, you mentioned that he and Joe they play checkers. You know, he tells her stories, whatever. That's very sweet, and I love seeing that develop, right?
mm-hmm.
So good thing there. However, his comments to her about not doing as she is told, even after she saved him from the machine,
Mm-hmm.
those types of comments that he makes to her
Mm.
are still very demeaning and are really putting her in a childish light. Do you know, like we find out later in the story that like Joe offers him a gun and he says, "No, you're trained to use that. They scare me," or whatever he says. He clearly, some part of him does recognize the fact that she was trained by Unit.
Mm.
You know, she does know how to use a gun and all this kind of stuff, and he acknowledges that fact. But then he's like, you know, my instructions are to be followed. You like, and he's like, you could have gotten hurt, but he never says thank you.
Mm.
Do you know? And he's like, yo, can you actually follow instructions this time? And I'm like, fuck off. Like, it's this weird thing with John's doctor that I won't say I never noticed it before. Like with like the Doctor Who stories I'd watched before this go through, because I had.
Mm.
But the last 2 weeks with Joe, I'm like, okay, when are we? I'm hoping that by the end of the story we've sort of accomplished that hurdle. But there was another bit at the end. So I will say another thing I liked. I do like how he rushed to Joe's aid
Mm-hmm.
when she was kidnapped. He has clearly learned something from what he did to Liz in
Mm-hmm.
Ambassadors of Death, where he didn't give a fiddler's monkey. Right? So that was great. That was great. Like I said, the talking to her, playing checkers, that was great. Acknowledging her unit training, that was good. I actually found his reaction to Barnum incredibly frustrating.
Okay.
Now, this may have to do with my current mindset. Right, just going to put that out there, right? But Joe had developed a friendship with Barnum, you know, a sort of protective dynamic with him.
Mm.
She clearly cared very deeply for him. She went out of her way to make sure that he was okay, that he was well cared for. Herself and Summers together, they kind of took him under their wing, shall we say.
Mm.
And she's understandably devastated that he died.
Yeah.
And then the doctor's like, well, how do you think I feel? There's no need to make it about you. She's allowed to vent her emotions without you kind of phrasing it that she's saying all these things that's making you feel even more guilty. And I'm like, no, back up. Like, you can have your separate guilt,
Mm.
and she can vent her upset without you. Because the way he says it a little bit harshly, it's a little bit cutting. I was like, well, how do you think I feel? I was like, well, why should you feel any worse than she does? You used him as a shield.
Mm.
She actually knew him. So yeah, you can feel whatever you want. That doesn't belittle how she feels.
See, this is the thing. Now, I didn't read it that way.
Hmm.
But again, as I said, I am viewing this with a bit of rose tinted glasses because of how very undoctor like his attitude towards stuff was last week.
Hmm.
So anything that I can take away from it as a positive, that's what I was looking at here.
Hmm.
But see, I kind of know my mind is going back. Like we talked about, when Victoria left Fury from the Deep,
Hmm.
and Doctor just goes, well, I was it. I loved her. Like he said, like I'll miss her too, or
Mm.
something like
I miss
that.
her too, or something
Yeah,
like that.
I miss her too. Yeah, something along those lines. So I was like, was that also kind of selfish, or was that empathy? And is the doctor just not very good at empathy? Well, which is bullshit
Yeah, like,
because we've seen him be good at empathy. Like,
yeah. The way I see it is that like Joe was basically saying that like she wanted to protect Barnum,
hmm,
and she felt like she failed in that. He trusted her. He did basically whatever she told him to do, and he died because of it.
yeah,
Do you know? Barnum didn't know the doctors. Barnum knew Joe and trusted Joe,
yeah,
and she possibly felt that she played on that trust, and then he died. And yeah, the fact that it was the doctor's idea, he's it's sort of made out a little bit to me. Again, this is just my read. I'd be really interested in what our listeners think of
hmm,
this particular scene, because the way it came out to me was, you know, you think you feel bad. How do you think I feel? As if the doctor's pain at Barnum's death is so much more important than Joe's,
hmm,
and so much greater than Joe's. And he can feel however much pain he wants. That's entirely his thing, right? Different people react differently. But the way he phrases it, because she says sorry, I think, and I'm like, don't apologize. Like, you're allowed to have your own emotions, Joe, and he's not allowed to make you feel bad for venting them.
hmm.
Maybe that's just my mindset at the moment. I'm particularly sensitive to that stuff at the moment, but it just rubbed me the wrong way.
I can see how it would. I can see how it
Hmm.
would. Yeah. But again, as I
Yeah,
said, like, I just might have the rose tinted glasses on.
yeah. The other thing is that like, and I won't say I hate it because the Brigadier laughs it off. But his comment at the end of, "Oh, the Master can go off to any planet he wants. He can travel in time and space, and I'm stuck here with you, Brigadier."
Hmm.
And it's like, these people treat you practically like family. Could you be less of a dickhead, please?
Yeah.
In saying that, though, and going off what I literally just said, he is also entitled to his emotions, and he's
Yeah.
entitled to feel frustrated and confined and whatever. But like, leave the Brigadier alone.
Yeah. Poor
He
Brigadier.
feeds you. He houses you. Like,
He clothes you.
he clothed you. He gave you a car. You know.
Hmm. Will we move on to the companions?
Yeah. So, what order would you like to go in?
I think now that we've established the people, we'll do our usual thing of permanent and then auxiliary.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be Joe the Brigadier. I'm going to go Benton and Yates.
Yeah, I would agree with
Yeah.
that. With that. Yeah.
So, Joe.
I think it was a good outing for Joe today.
It was a
So
great outing for Joe.
I was concerned about Joe last week.
Hmm.
Nothing against Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Katie was great,
Yeah.
but Joe was overly clumsy last week, to the point of like, how did Unity even let her go investigate a factory by herself?
See, that's the thing. Like, I've been looking at that. I was looking at that scene. I'm like, did she go off on her own accord? Because,
No, I think it was she drew up the list, and she pulled that one, and Benton pulled a different one, and Yates pulled a different one, and whatever.
but see, like, I know we're taking away from this episode,
Yeah.
but then it makes no sense because like she can't remember which factory she went to. But if she was
Well, maybe
assigned,
she went to a few.
if she was assigned the factory, then it was like, well, clearly you know which one she fucking went
Well,
to.
maybe she went to a few of them. Who
Possibly,
knows?
you know.
Or maybe she was the one who was sent to scope them out.
Or maybe
Who
it's
knows?
just bad script writing.
Or maybe it's just a plot hole. Anyway,
Fucking plot holes.
this week was a much better outing. There was a lot less of the clumsy nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think the closest we got to it was her freeing the doctor from the machine's influence, and him saying, "You were meant to take this to the governor." And she said, "Yeah, well, I thought it was important."
Mm.
And the machine was trying to kill you. And he fucking braids her for it. Fuck. Mm.
Mm.
Anyway, I much prefer this Joe over
Mm.
last week's Joe, because she's presented as much more capable. Like, clearly she's efficient with a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, while she probably isn't the strongest person, trays and hitting people over the head. Cool, she's got that sorted. Like, at one point, like, no, I know the Brigadier comes in at the end, and shoots your man,
Mm-hmm.
Mailer. But when Mailer's taking him down the steps, Joe pushes back into him to knock
Yeah.
him over, and is like, "Now, doctor," as in go,
Mm-hmm.
like leave. And the doctor turns around and goes to run back up. It's like, dude, she literally like other way. Go the other way. Like that was your getaway moment. And she's perfectly willing to throw herself into harm's way. Which I thought was great. Particularly like when she destabilized the riot. I thought that was brilliant.
I like that's the thing is that like now it might be a small bit exaggerated,
mm,
but I think that if it had come down to a one-on-one fight between Mailer and Joe, I think for at least for the start of it, Joe might have a chance of success if she could keep him fucking frustrated. But I
yeah.
think the longer the situation will go on, the more at a disadvantage she is.
Yeah, I don't think Jo was like a highly qualified agent,
Yeah,
but she did have training and she
yeah,
did use it. And like I said, her destabilization of the riot or like the takeover of the
mm.
jail at the first takeover,
I love that
that was
sequence.
really good. That
Oh,
was so
like
good.
so to describe it for everyone, Joe kicks Mailer's arm holding the gun, and she kicks it so that obviously like the gun goes off and hits a prisoner, but Joe kicks his arm into so that it's aiming towards a group of prisoners, so that if the gun does go off, it's going to hit
Hmm.
them. She then picks it up, rushes over to Vosper, fires the gun into the air to show him that she is serious. At which point, like, all the guards are kicking the shit out of the prisoners, but there's no tippiness over like she has the gun and she means fucking
Yeah,
business. There's no double holding of it, at a very shaky angle. She's holding it one-handed in the air and she's like, yeah.
yeah.
So
Like
Joe
the
is
doctor mentions it later. Like you're
yeah,
trained to use that. I'm not.
yeah.
Whatever. Um, it's also great to see her taking care of Barnum.
Hmm.
And even standing up to Gay. It wasn't Yates, it was Benton and whatever the other officer was.
Yeah.
That Barnum stays here.
Mm-hmm.
Get him some food.
Yeah.
Take it, like, and I love that, and it's because you sort of see all the different aspects. You have the sweet Joe. You have the Joe who is a unit agent, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. I kind of take it the way like Peggy Carter didn't have a rank; she was Agent Carter.
Yeah.
I sort of imagine that she's technically like Agent Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Yeah.
That's sort of my brain on that. But yeah, I think she was great. The story.
No, she was
She's very good.
yeah, fantastic. And like she lost none of what makes her appealing, but
No.
she gained all the stuff that made her look like a incompetent
Mm,
person. Like, you know?
yeah, like you can kind of see in this story why whoever in her family got her into unit,
Mm-hmm.
why they even allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
Do you know? Because last week it was kind of like, did she just have lots of hobbies? And
Yeah.
like her uncle was like, we need somewhere to put her. Whereas with this, you can actually believe that,
Yeah.
yeah, she may still be a bit of a klutz. That's fine.
No,
But she's capable, which is
like,
great.
yeah, like, but like we're two stories into Joe now, and like we've got three. We got like what 13 left to go, I think.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 13
13.
left to go.
Like this is for
I
me.
can
This is
count.
yeah. Go you. But for me, this is already a contender for best performance
Oh, I would agree so.
in her rambling. Like,
Yeah,
and
I've seen a few others like off and on
yeah.
over the years, and I would agree.
But I love when it's this early into a character's run that we already have a contender.
Mm. I would say the same thing was true with Liz.
Well,
Now, obviously, Liz didn't stay around for
yeah,
as long, but if you were watching that on broadcast, you wouldn't have known that.
yeah, no, not a hope.
You
No,
know, and yeah, this is great.
yeah,
Then we have the Brigadier.
I fucking love him here. Like, this is brilliant. He has so many fucking good moments here. And like you're like telling Yates to stop grinning like a Cheshire cat. What else was there? The whole thing of like the doctor says like because like the doctor goes Fu Peng, must be Hokkien, and the British goes no doctor, he's Chinese. And like he like Nick Courtney plays exasperated so good
Oh,
because
he
like
does.
he gets completely exasperated when the doctor and Fu Peng are just talking amongst themselves,
Mm.
and he's like kind of like trying to get a word in edgeways. Like his interactions with Benton, like he jokingly kind of going, with Benton's head, I suppose you want to lie down, that type of thing. But he's such a proud papa of Benton, like as in episodes 5 and 6, he's like
Yeah.
such a proud papa. But we always talk about the brig leading from the front, and he does it here, but in the most glorious way possible, by putting on a Cockney accent, disguised as a tradesman or like a delivery driver.
It's so good.
Oh, he's like,
so good.
he's got like, I've got supplies for the governor, tuck, food.
You can imagine him thinking back to like Basic and like how do the guys in Basic talk or whatever. Like he's clearly pulling that from somewhere.
It's just fucking awesome. Like, and like the sequence of the attack on the prison, again, it's the brig, just like Christ almighty, like the prisoners have the high ground. Like, unfortunately, he drew the Anakin stick here in this example one, but he overcame. Because like the courtyard is massive, and the prisoners obviously have the advantage of the guard towers. But no, he's in the fucking middle of it, signaling his men on. He's not ducking for cover. He's like,
with his pistol. I love that.
With his pistol.
My thing about the Brigadier is he does all of this with the pistol. It's like he doesn't have a rifle.
Yeah.
He just always has just a pistol, and I'm not a weapons expert, right, by any stretch, but I find that very charming in some respects.
After a certain distance, it's gone, completely inaccurate. But his whole thing of like standing in the center and signaling his men on, it very reminds you of like, Sharp's Waterloo, where it's like, see me lads, I'm your colour, follow me. That's where it is. Like, he is the flag the guys follow, and that's why I love the Brigadier, because it's not the title, and it's him. It is Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart that they follow.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed in this, and you kind of mentioned it there with the whole he's Chinese comment, is the brig doesn't really lean heavily into the international relations side of UNIT.
No.
Which he probably should. United Nations in terms of that. However, I'm going to defend the Brigadier in this, right? That replacement delegate, Fu Peng, was that his name?
Fu Peng, yeah.
He was an asshole. Right? I get it, right? He's affronted because this Westerner didn't abide by custom in his initial introduction. This Westerner doesn't know your customs. That is his failing, right? He also doesn't know your fucking language.
Yeah.
He is the security manager, basically, for the conference, and you ignored him the entire time he was there. You didn't answer a single fucking question. You had an interpreter in the form of the doctor. If you wanted to stay speaking your own language, the doctor could have translated for you, and instead, you were an asshole. And I get that he has his own customs to follow, and that's fine, but a guy died, and this is the man who's meant to be investigating it. To not speak to him is super sus.
Yeah.
And I got really, like, because you could tell that he was like, what the shit? What the shit was that like?
But I think that's the thing with Nick, is that he plays it so well that there are times you just can't help but laugh at it. Yeah. I mean, like when like Cosworth keeps interrupting him about the plans, and like, he just keeps looking up at him as if to say, "Do you mind?"
He does seem very stressed in this story. It's kind of interesting to see UNIT as a sort of security thing, leading into the United Nations side than the Intelligence Task Force,
as opposed to which spooky person do we fight this week?
Yeah, so like he's very stressed, and I actually thought it was very sweet that he fell asleep in his office. And you can imagine that the corporal or whatever that was,
Corporal Bell,
you can kind of imagine that she came in and just closed the curtains and just left him sleep. Do you know?
But again, loyalty to the man more so than the position.
Yeah. And first, he does take that stress out on people, and the wrong people at times, like Benton.
Yeah.
You know, when Benton loses
Chin
Li originally, and he's like, you had a headache and you fainted. Right. Do you want to go for a nap? Like, do you know, like, it's not fair because it's not Benton's fault. But then again, the Brigadier has no other evidence other than this guy just said he had a pain in his head and then he fell over.
Yeah.
And then she was gone. So, you can't really blame him too much. And he does come right in the end. Like I said, he has that proud parent moment when he, makes Benton the acting governor
Governor of the prison,
of the prison and stuff like that. And, he watches as Benton takes his seat and like gets his papers sorted, and then like he makes that passing comment of, don't let this go to your head. And it's great because we mentioned that before, that like I always sort of get the sense with the Brig and Benton that it's not that, like, because we talked about in Inferno where Benton was getting in on the joke and the Brig sort of went Sergeant, as if to remind him, and he doesn't do it with Benton in a cruel way. And you sort of, like I still expect that, like, the reason he's doing it is so that when Benton eventually moves on to his next post, he'll be a better officer. He'll be a better soldier for the lessons that he's learned from.
Plus, I think the Brigadier knows that only let them in so much, because if I go, the person that's replacing me may not want the same relationship, and
Benton may end up like Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy. He could be perfectly fine, but we're just assuming that he did.
We assume he died this like horrible death. He's like, Brigadier, remember me, take care of my family. Like, he's probably fine. Again, you mentioned leading from the front. You mentioned the undercover stuff, which I thought was just fucking brilliant.
So good, so good.
And I love that, like, he's there running across the courtyard, taking down guys or whatever. He's signaling the men like, come on. The guys haven't even pulled in. He's like, I'm going to find the doctor. So he's just fucking out of there. It's fucking,
yeah.
I love the Brig.
So we have his best boys in Benton and Yates. So we said Benton first.
Yeah, Benton is the best boy. And he gets a bit of a hard doing, like, for the first 4 episodes of this.
Yeah, the whole thing.
The mind thing, getting a bit degraded by the Brigadier, then getting beaten up.
Or like the Briggs comment to Yates about, with Benton with you better be careful, he might lose the missile. Like, come on, man.
Like things like that. Like, I was like, leave Benton alone. But again, he comes good. He's able to restore the Brigadier's faith in him, which clearly means a lot to him. He gets left in charge of the prison, and he's still Benton.
Yeah, but
throughout all of it, like, he could have easily thrown a strop and done a Joe from last week.
Yeah,
and he doesn't.
Receiving the thing, like he checked himself out in the infirmary before he was given medical clearance, and like you can tell that the Brig is impressed. It's like just that tenacity, like, and to the extent of, like, he not only does he assign Benton to a part of the attack plan, he gives him a command of a section.
Yeah,
like, he doesn't put Cosworth or he doesn't put another ranking officer in charge of it. He leaves Benton in charge of it, which is great because Benton is his guy.
Yeah, Benton let him down at the start, which pissed him off.
Yeah,
but okay, Benton noticed the black van. Benton, he's still got the eye on the prize. He still knows what he's doing. Okay, let's give him another go.
Yeah, and the best thing about it as well is, like, when Benton takes over the role of governor of the prison, he's not overwhelmed by anything.
No,
he just takes everything with, like they tease it. I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but they tease it ever so slightly when he's looking for, like, these requisition orders for Summers, and Barnum then tries to take the phone over him. He's like, look, you can go speak to whoever you want, just whatever. But he's able, like, to carry on his conversation with Summers, but he's not, like, flipping the table, or he's not, like, scatterbrained everywhere. Like, so
he's trying to find the file. But he's also a sergeant, and he's not the Brigadier's personal aide at this point. But he's used to. He knows what paperwork to look for. Just the desk is a mess, and he needs to find it.
And it's great actually seeing him be present throughout the majority of the story here, as opposed to last week, where, like, we kind of had to sacrifice screen time for him for the Master, Joe, and Yates coming in.
Hmm.
So speaking of Yates,
Yeah, don't be such a creep, Mike. Okay? It is not done to refer to a captain of a foreign military as a doll in front of your own commanding officer, or even just in general. And, like, I kind of have to side with the Brigadier, like, the Cheshire Cat smile, like, Mike, you know, the Brigadier called Benton on it to, remember your place in terms of how you deal with superiors, whatever. Mike needs to remember his place.
yeah,
Like, he's not really learning as much from the Brigadier as Benton does.
no,
He doesn't take the lessons on board. And to be honest, I still don't really like him.
like I have two real notes on him. One is, you there, stop that grinning, and the other one is that he really needs to work on his espionage skills.
Yeah. Like, you get the feeling that he thinks he's James Bond.
Yeah. Because there's at least 500 yards of open ground surrounding that airfield, and I think he hides behind an oil barrel. And when he tries to take off on his motorbike, again, it's like, God, it's clearly, there's like, oh wait, there's a guy over there on a motorbike.
Oh, and look like one of the motorbikes we saw earlier.
Yeah.
No. And your man's in military uniform.
So at the moment he's 0 for 2, but we'll see what next week will bring us.
Yeah, I still hold out hope.
Yeah.
I hold out. People love Yates. I want to see the Yates that these people love because I haven't seen him yet. I'm really hoping it's not a Stephen thing all over again. Where some people love Stephen and we never did.
Yeah, no.
And I'm hoping it's not that.
I can just imagine the We Love Mike Yates, the annual We Love Mike Yates Society, interrupted by 2 loud-mouthed Irish people flying a Benton flag.
And then you've got the Benton Yates shippers in the corner being like, you can love both.
So now we have our prominent characters.
Yeah, so again, we've discussed this in the past. Paddy usually comes up with the character list, and then I watched the episode and wrote my notes about it after. But I don't really have much to say about either of them. They're prominent characters because they're in it a lot.
Well, see, okay,
Chin Lee would have been a prominent character for the first half.
Only 2 episodes though.
Okay, it's the first third then. But she was a prominent character there.
But
we're not discussing her. So.
But here's the difference, right? Is that at that time, Chin Lee is not, at no point is Chin Lee under her own control. So she's essentially a puppet. So
there was Rex really last week. We discussed him.
But see, Rex rebelled a lot. We did.
Rex rebelled a little.
Well,
I didn't say he rebelled anywhere. Chin Lee rebelled as well.
Well, okay, we saw multiple occasions of Rex attempting to rebel, whereas with Chin Lee, we didn't really see a whole pile.
Okay, but anyway, with Summers and Barnum, right? Summers doesn't care that he works in a prison. He's a doctor. That's his job. I love how protective he is of both Joe and later Barnum.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that he sort of has this do no harm thing with Barnum where, he doesn't realize, obviously, that Barnum isn't affected by the machine. And his first thing is just get him away from the machine.
Yeah.
And he's almost like, Joe, what the hell are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Don't endanger my patient, which is great. It's nice to have a doctor character that is just a nice guy.
But see, I think that is a reason why I have Summers here, is because Summers represents that character that is very rare to find in Who, in the sense of he's a doctor that he so cares about the patients under him, regardless of what Barnum did in the past, he's here to treat the man as he is now. Also, I like how he didn't treat Joe like a child or a nurse. So I think characters like that are very few and far between in Who. So call me sentimental, but I feel like they should be lauded when they do appear. Whereas with Barnum, I'm a fucking sucker for the gentle giant type thing.
My thing with Barnum is I don't like how he was used. I would have rather that someone suggested they use Barnum to bring the machine to the master,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone advocated for him and said no, and it
Yeah.
didn't happen because Barnum, as we see him after he goes through the machine,
Mm-hmm.
and my apologies if this is if people take this the wrong way, right? It's not intended that way. He is mentally incapacitated.
Yeah.
He has very little memory. He is incredibly childlike, and he is not capable of taking care of himself.
No.
And he needs advocates.
Mm-hmm.
Summers was an advocate for him, and in many cases, so was Joe.
Yeah.
But he was used in this story almost like without his consent, really. He didn't understand,
Yeah.
and I have an issue with that.
Yeah, because like when the doctor, like first of all, the doctor, no, it's indicated that he has like that you often see it in characters that are presented like Barnum, that when they mentally regress,
Mm.
their physical strength is exceeded or
Mm.
it's increased for whatever reason you want to put it down as. So we have that scenario here where he tries to strangle the guard, and the doctor, you like rather than trying to reason with him or whatever, he just does a fucking Venusian on him, and it hurts him.
Mm.
And then when Barnum is scared of the machine, the doctor like forces him back to sit down, and like then there's like no real. It's like I don't think there's an attempt to explain it in a way that he can understand it.
Yeah. And that's an issue I have. And to us, it's an issue I have with the doctor as well. I didn't mention it in the doctor part, but
Yeah.
like, they're using someone who is mentally incapacitated and who is incapable of making decisions for himself. And that, in many ways, is no better than what the Master did to Rex last week.
Hmm.
You know, the Master took away Rex's free will.
Yeah.
Here, they're imposing what they want on Barnum's will,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that he is malleable and he'll do whatever they ask.
Yeah.
And I have an issue with that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, like I'd agree in the sense of like I would have liked. I suppose I would have liked to have seen Joe advocate for him a small bit more.
I would have liked to have seen someone advocate for him and Barnum say, you know, but the machine hurts Joe. I want to protect Joe. And yeah, you're kind of going into a little bit of a different stereotype with that, but at least you're giving Barnum his own agency.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? Like, I know the whole, like, you know, we kind of had it a little bit in Evil the Daleks, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Kemble.
McKemble, right? But even if you had a little bit of that here, where Barnum is like, well, Joe is my friend, and I want to protect Joe, and the machine hurts her when I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll help because I want to help Joe. And like, even just giving him that little bit of agency, I think would have been good. And it bothers me that the machine stripped away his negative impulses. It also stripped away all of his agency. And as opposed to advocating for a way to get that back, bear in mind, no one tries to restore his memory.
No.
No one tries to undo what the machine did to him.
Hmm.
They're perfectly happy that he's now mentally incapacitated and mentally
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say he's mentally disabled as such, but like
He's kind of
he was mentally violated, and no one
effectively
tried to fix it.
he's starting over from scratch. Like
and no one tried to fix it. And it's
No.
like that you know, again, we've 6 episodes here. Could we not
have some sort of
have someone
well,
advocate for that?
what I will say is, given the events going on in the prison, there probably wasn't enough time to try any sort of rehabilitation thing, given the fact that like you have the riot while he's still in the hospital. And then he comes out of it and the right thing. So then it's about getting everything back to normal again. At which point the master then fucking comes. And then,
Yeah, but like once Summers realizes that the machine is evil in its own right, I'm surprised he didn't advocate for his patient more.
Oh yeah. So I thought you meant in terms of like actually seeing scenes of people trying to work with him to gain.
Even just question and advocate for it.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that was missing. I think there was advocacy missing here for Barnum. Who, you know, is essentially still a ward of the state.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he
Yeah.
is still a prisoner. He has not been released yet,
Mhm.
and you know he should be taken proper care of.
And I think this is why, like, I Neil McCarthy does such a great job here because he's actually now made us have this discussion. His
Mm.
portrayal of the character has made us care about him to the extent of, like, we wanted people to fight for him. We want him to actually be looked after by at least someone, you know.
Yeah,
And I hate his death. His death
so do
sequence is
I.
it's horrible because he tries to help the master. Then he realizes he even looks to Joe, the doctor, as a sort of apology for, I messed up, sorry. And then he goes, I'll try and fix it. At which
Yeah,
point he gets fucking run over.
yeah,
And yeah, it's like, it's a very distressing. It's wonderfully done,
mm.
wonderfully done. But in terms of it does its job. Like,
Yeah,
it actually really wrenches at you. So, like, I think, yeah, Neil McCarthy did a great job of bringing this character to life.
yeah. I would completely agree. And I'm going to take back what I said about the prominent character, but I probably because he didn't have much agency, which is why
Mm.
putting him prominent character feels weird.
Mhm.
You know, he was a tool used by others,
Yeah,
which I don't agree with either.
no,
So,
food for thought.
mm.
So now we have the villains. So we have the Master, Mailer, and the Machine, or the creature inside the machine, or fuck it, just the mind of evil.
Yeah. Why don't we start with Mailer and
Cool.
then the Master and then the titular
Hmm.
Mind of Evil. Mailer, typical prison gang leader,
Mhm.
really. I'm
Yeah,
surprised he stuck around as long as he did.
like, we've seen this sort of, like, prick before, but he, like, compared to, say, like, two other characters that spring to mind when I think of Mailer are Regan
Mm,
from Ambassadors of Death
mm,
and Septeria from the Romans.
mm,
Go cast your mind all the way back there,
yeah.
where it's like, when Mailer is on screen, I don't like. I get nothing. I don't feel any unease. I don't feel anything like that. He's just a puppet of the master. Compared to the other two guys, Regan and Sacheria, every time they're on, I get uneasy
Mm,
because there's always something that they haven't played that we haven't seen yet, and I never get that with Mailer.
mm,
Um, so it kind of leads me to the curious thing to say that if I get the impression from the start of it now that Barnum is sort of like the guy in the prison at the
mm.
before the whole thing starts. So I'm wondering, like, what Mailer is like in a world where Barnum is top dog.
Yeah, like it's sort of weird, right? I am listening to a book at the moment by a challenging author, I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Orson Scott Card, who's a challenging individual in terms of liking his books. But I'm listening to the book Ender's Shadow,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you can ignore certain things, is actually a very good book.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that is mentioned in that book is this idea of where you fit in the pecking order of bullies and what bully do you go after. And it sort of mirrors the pecking order that you'd see at a prison. Do you know, like you said, like Barnum, because like you imagine, because you know they're going down through the list.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, of worst, next worst,
Yeah.
next worst, next worst, next worst, etc. Um, what it brings to my mind though is like I think it would be interesting to see like what would all of this have been like if it was Mailer had gone first and Barnum was the guy
Yeah.
that's now fully functioning or whatever. But the thing that I wonder about is, and your question raises it, is like the machine takes away the negative impulses,
Mm-hmm.
and like it overloads on Barnum, which means he probably had a lot
Mm.
of negative impulse.
Like, what the fuck did this guy do?
Yeah, but also I wonder if the positive impulse that's left over, like that is Barnum, that is
Mm.
still part of him.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you took away the negative parts of Mailer, what good is left? Do you know, I think it's an interesting thing because the
Is he?
machine didn't make Barnum the way he is in the
Mm.
sense that it didn't add anything, it only took away.
Mm.
So was there good in Barnum very deep down? Does Mailer have that same good
Mm.
very deep down?
Possibly. Who
Who knows?
knows? Very Megatron Starscream relationship we're talking about here.
I don't understand the reference. I'm sorry.
No, it's like in the Decepticons, Megatron is the head of them, and Starscream is like his second in command. It's always saying like, "Well, I could do a fucking better job." At which point it's like, "Yeah, but you constantly get bitch slapped every time you try and make a move against him."
I am aware that Decepticons are the bad guys.
Yes,
Yes, and the Autobots are the good guys.
yes, yes.
I know that much.
No, Starscream.
Paul and Dan would be very proud of me. I know that much.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, Starscream is that kind of guy that just constantly fucking just sits there kind of going, "Well, I could do fucking shit better," you know. At which point it's like every time you're given the opportunity, you either fuck up, or when you're called out, you kind of just kind of go, "No, I wasn't saying anything," you know.
Well, then Verster Mailer, like he does lead quite well.
He does.
He rallies guys
Yeah.
quite well, you know.
Well, like, okay, I suppose it's a small bit unfair to Starscream, seeing so he did create his own fucking band of Decepticons. But yeah, he repurposed old decommissioned World War II vehicles and turned them into things.
Were they called the Star Screamers? And did they have an amazing 80s metal band?
No, they weren't, unfortunately. I can't remember the specific group of them. I think they were the Combaticons.
That's just a title. Star Screamers would have been better. If you're listening, Transformers writers, make that a thing.
It's like Robot Chicken. I am Lex Luthor, and this is our band, Sex Luthor. So then we have the Master, and we have the Machine / Creature / Mind of Evil.
Yeah. So when did the Master get Tok'ra technology?
Now, are we talking about the Master, or are we talking about the Machine?
The Master with the little thing behind
Shindi's
ear.
Yeah. I don't know.
Either that or the guys who made Stargate were totally looking at that going, and yoink.
I'm pretty sure like that fucking Ivan Reitman who did Ghostbusters 2, you know, was like kind of going, something that feeds on negative emotions. I like it. Like a cop in a donut factory. I love that line. So this thing feeds on bad vibes.
But the thing again, right? So the Master again, the story, right? Okay. I'm going to do my positives first, right? I love Roger. Roger's great. I love how he plays the Master. I think that's fantastic. The classiness, the fact that, like, again, on the behind the sofa, Sasha Dewan made the comment that, like, underneath whatever costume getup the Master is wearing is his perfect suit.
Yeah.
Underneath, you know, he's very collected. He's, you know, he's proper professional, whatever. I'm not a big fan of the writing for him, though.
Before we get on to him a bit further, I have to issue an apology to you and fans of Roger Delgado as well. So what happens is, before we release the episode, I will listen to it for errors, you know, or which are very, 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 very few. So, unfortunately, while we were discussing Roger last week, at one point you called him Robert.
Did I?
Yeah, when you were discussing his death, and you called him Robert.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that is.
And that slipped by me, so that's my bad. It slipped by me both times.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Feel like kind of like shit now.
We called him Roger the rest of the time, but I think what it was is because Robert Holmes.
I think I got so emotional about it.
Yeah, plus, like, I'm going to blame Bob Holmes for this one because Bob Holmes wrote Terror of the Autons.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah. Anyway, my apologies about the Roger thing. Anyway, I love Roger Delgado. I love the way he portrays the Master. I don't like the way the Master is being written, though, because he's written as this, like, crazy sociopathic mastermind who misses the giant hole right in front of him. So last week it was he had this amazing plan. The Nestians are going to invade, blah 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 blah. Oh, but don't you realize that they will kill you too? Oh shit, they will. Why the fuck didn't I think of that? And it's the same thing this week, is that he has this creature or whatever, he built this machine around it to use it to destabilize the peace talks or whatever. Thinking like 50 steps ahead, like, what will happen if it doesn't want to do what I tell it to do? And he needs the doctor to come in and help him figure it out. But I was like, fuck off.
But see, this is the thing now, right? Because I also have that point. you and I, like you, I suppose I would view it as he needs the doctor's help. In his mind, he is forcing the doctor to do his bidding because at this, in his head, he has captured the doctor and is now going to force him to help. Is going to force him to keep the machine under their control.
No, but it just makes him out to be stupid. Like the fact that he is once again in the following story, he again has an alien consciousness that he is using that he cannot control, and he needs the doctor to help him control it.
But he knows that at this stage that it might be a small bit more for him to handle. Whereas like it wasn't until the resolution of Terror of the Autons where he's like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, fuck it. Whereas at least it's earlier here he realizes that, well, at least I have another Time Lord here that I can use as a fucking meat shield.
All right, yeah, but still though, like
I get that you kind of want to see him at least take care of shit by himself and not
yeah,
rely on everything. But the master kind of does it at times. He'd always work an angle with someone else to do the dirty work where
yeah,
he
but the master that we've seen so far, right? So
yeah.
we're going purely of last week and this week. He's that guy who's like, I'm winning 3-dimensional chess, and misses the fact that your pawn is about to take his king. Do you know? Like he's fucking
It's not even that. He's go, I'm the guy that's playing 3-dimensional chess. Well, that's great. I have a gun.
yeah. Or it's like,
Uh,
I'm going to win 3-dimensional chess. That's great. We're playing snakes and ladders.
yeah.
You
It's a stupid
know?
human game. But like, oh yeah, without what we know going down the line, he is coming across as very Dick Dastardly.
Yeah, which I don't like
No.
because Roger is better than that, and he
Yeah.
plays him better than that. And so the writing isn't supporting Roger at this point, which
No.
I'm not a fan of.
No. But it's but I suppose the thing that definitely has is his screen presence. When he's there, you're just drawn to him. Like
Oh yeah,
the guy could be reading off a fucking cereal box, and I'm like, yes, please tell me your dastardly plan to add milk. No, yeah, but like it's his charisma, it's his presence, it's his chemistry with everyone that he works with
mm,
is great. Even Mailer, like Roger has great chemistry with your man.
yeah.
It's great.
Mm.
So then we have the machine.
The machine reminds me a bit of the Animus from the Web Planet.
Do you know what it reminds me of? A fucking Abra. Bastard teleporting all over the place and he's nearly fucking impossible to catch. Oh,
Okay. Okay. So in terms of the effect of the
yeah.
creature that it has on people, I'm going with the Animus,
Right.
and possibly from a different Starbase show, the Skin of Evil, which we said also reminded us
Yeah.
of the Animus.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of reminded me a lot of that. It's a very scary concept.
Oh, it's a terrifying concept. Terrifying.
When you consider the fact that it causes you to experience your worst fears without any physical stimulus. Like, it caused small bites and scratches to appear on someone.
Like,
that's fucked up.
It convinces you that what you're experiencing is so real. Your body creates the effect.
It's mental. It's so mental. And it's also, like, this is the first time, I think, possibly ever, to this point, that we've actually seen the Doctor's fears. Like, I know that the Doctor kind of showed Zoe a little bit of, like, this is what we faced before. But that was in a controlled environment. I think it's probably the first time we've actually seen the Doctor's fears. Do you know? The carryover from Inferno, which I thought was a brilliant add-on. I thought that was
it's wonderful.
wonderfully well done. And then the fact that it goes further and like all these other things, the Cybermen, the Daleks, and everything else, which is crazy. It's the one question I have though is once the hairdryer piece was removed from the machine, right? So the hairdryer piece goes down over your head,
Yeah.
and it sucks out all of the evil thoughts and it gives it to the machine, right? Which stores it up and becomes the evil creature with one eye. What was its motivation after that? Because without the headpiece, it can't absorb evil anymore. So does it want more evil to absorb, or is it just going to kill people? Has it absorbed enough now?
But see, that's
because the master says, I'm going to starve you. But we don't see it sucking the evil out of anyone. It just fucks with
But
their heads.
but see, this is the thing now that you'd be kind of wondering is that like, okay, I have a feeling
Mm,
that the headpiece is is a filter.
mm,
So I think that when it kills you, it feeds off you as it kills you.
mm.
So like when it kills all those prisoners, it takes the negative emotions and that's what keeps it sustaining itself. I think the master used the headpiece so that it would like, okay, so I go take their negative emotions, but at least it's not going to fucking kill people.
Well, yeah, because like, if you think about it, like with the doctor or whatever,
Mm.
like when it attacks the doctor, when it attacks the master, when it attacks anybody who survives,
Yeah,
we don't see them being mentally any different other than being shaken by their fears.
yeah.
You know? So it's like it has two powers. It has the evil absorption
Mm.
and then the fear manifestation. And like they're different.
It's like I've often said that sometimes the unknown component is the scarier component.
Mm.
And the doctor says that this thing is a parasite, from a parasitic entity from the dawn of time type thing.
Mm.
So like it kind of puts it up there with like it Pennywise from it,
Mm.
in just the sense of like it's from the creation. It's like no one knows where the fuck it comes from. If it's one of a kind, if it's the weakest thing of its species, no one knows. And it's like if this thing is strong enough to cause all this fucking havoc, and it takes the explosion of a warhead to get rid of it, God help us if any more of it comes.
Yeah. It's a very scary thought. How would you rate it compared to the Animus?
That is a very good question because see, at least the animus showed. No, they're both sentient,
Mm.
but the animus was able to communicate.
Yes.
And actually, going back to I think the doctor probably even going back to William Hartnell,
Mm.
he realized like the difficulty that they had taking on the animus, and I kind of looking back now was like, was that just a front that we talked about William Hartnell having? Like,
Mm.
did he actually fear what the animus represented?
Mm.
Um, so I don't know. I'm going to give the edge slightly to the creature, the mind of evil, in terms of that, because the fact that it doesn't communicate, it doesn't speak to them.
Mm.
So like, is it doing it's a biological imperative to feed and sustain itself? Is it doing it because it takes pleasure in what it's doing? Does it have an agenda of its own? We don't know, and that's kind of scarier to me. It is anyway. Like,
Yeah. No, I'd agree. I would agree. So yeah, at the creepy control you and manifest your fears convention, we have the Animus, we have the Mind of Evil. At the sort of +1 table, we have the Skin of Evil,
mm-hmm.
who is really just a pile of tar. They can't really do much other than be a pile of tar that kills Tasha. Spoilers. But yeah, I think they're gonna have a very interesting convention.
Yeah. And the janitors were just like, the fuck's sake, do you know how hard it is to get slime out of carpet? uh,
Is this waste? Is it part of him? Oh god, I don't care.
do you mind? Oh, Christ.
Cool. So we have come to the final part of today's show, our
Mm-hmm.
overall thoughts.
Yes.
So, Paddy, overall thoughts on the Mind of Evil, please.
No, it might just be me, but I think we get a better feeling for like this new TARDIS family from this story than we did from the previous story.
Mm.
Like, I know that Yates isn't as present, but we're getting a bit more of the Brig and Benton, their development. Jo is hugely improved from her previous thing. The Doctor has kind of reverted to what we liked about him, like a small bit compared to the previous week.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, like Joe's a lot more fleshed out. The Master, as I said, to me he seems to be at least a little more cognizant of the threat of the machine. Hence his backup plan to get the Doctor involved. Um, Yates again seems less of a douche. Bit of still a douche, but less of one. And as I said, just Neil McCarthy's performance as Barnum, it actually just made me feel so much for that character that you kind of actually forget. We talked about it there in the discussion about Mailer. Like, what did he do?
Yep.
Like, we could be showing sympathy for like a fucking horrible murderer / rapist / whatever.
Mm.
You know, all we care about is the poor, pitiful fucking person in front of us.
Yeah.
And that again goes to the star performance of Neil McCarthy. My score initially for this was 4.
Mm.
Because I prefer this to Terror of the Autons. I would watch this over Terror of the Autons if I was given the choice.
Mm.
I've dropped my score down to 3.75 though. My initial deductions were for Mailer just being like a kind of a he didn't add anything that the secondary antagonist, or in this case probably the tertiary antagonist, can add. Like we've talked about Sevcheria, we talked about Regan, there's others examples like Packer. You know, Packer. Like just that kind of thing. Like, you know, he just didn't add any of those elements that I like from the tertiary or secondary antagonist. I would have loved a lot more tensions between the US and the PRC. Like I feel like that was kind of swept under the rug a small bit too fast. I would have liked to have seen it at least go into episode 3, fully episode 3, as opposed to just like getting resolved at the start of it. But the reason I dropped it down another small bit is you made me realize how much I cared about Barnum. The fact that no one tried to stop the Doctor from using him, or no one, we didn't see a scene of them rationalizing with him, going like, "We need your help. We need you to do this." We didn't see that. That actually has kind of pissed me off, because I'm a very sentimental person, and I don't like seeing people being taken advantage of, especially when they don't have the faculties to realize that they are being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So I don't want to drop it down any lower, because I still prefer this story to Terror of the Autons, which I rated 3.75. And if someone's just going off my numerical score, then I would want it to at least be a small bit higher and like they can listen to this wonderful 2-hour segment to get my impressions on stuff. So I'm leaving it at 3.75.
Cool. So for me, there are bits I liked about this. First of all, I will say the film work on this was fantastic. Everything bar the dragon was brilliant. Yeah. Right? The gunfights, Jesus Christ, so many people died in the story.
This is probably one of the highest body counts we've seen in a while.
Yeah. It's probably the most we've ever had, yeah. And I think it accomplished something which is very difficult to do in Who, in that it was very realistic. Do you know? You're not looking at wobbly sets.
No.
Which never took us out of the story before, but it's always good to call out when they do it really well. And in this case, they did.
Like just to cut across, like, a good example of that is the Romans, where you can kind of see the sets wobbling a small bit in the background, and like you kind of, like after a while you start to look out for stuff like that. Here, no, you don't even pay attention to it. You don't. Yeah. You're completely drawn into the story.
Yeah. So the film work was great. I think the Brig had some amazing moments. I think Joe, like we said, top performance out of the 2 so far for Joe, which is fantastic. There was something I noted that I forgot to mention earlier. So you mentioned last week we have Greyhound and Trap 1.
Yeah.
Right. This week we had a second one, which was Jupiter and Venus. Now, obviously planets, but also mythology, right? So Jupiter,
king of the Roman gods,
basically the equivalent of Zeus, and that's the Brigadier. And Yates is Venus.
Well, he is your fire. He is your desire.
Do you know? The goddess of love, sex, beauty, and fertility. And now I wonder if they were playing into the fact that the warhead was called the Thunderbolt,
Hmm.
and that they were playing. But I just find it really interesting that like you couldn't have gone with like I don't know, Pluto
Eros.
or something, with anything like Mars, whatever.
Yeah.
No, Venus. Okay, so. But that was just something I left out of the earlier discussion, and I remember a second ago. I was like, I had to talk about that.
That's the equivalent of Sue in Glee calling Kurt lady.
Yeah.
Just because he's feminine.
Yeah.
So just because like Yates is a potentially a bit of a man whore, like he's now Venus.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And big, then like you've got Papa Brigadier as Jupiter. The Master is an interesting villain. I want to see more though.
Yeah.
I want to see his intelligence carrying through to the fucking end of a story, and not in my mind being undermined partway through. The story itself was grand.
Yeah.
To be honest, it didn't really grip me, and the things that did grip me were the things I didn't like.
Yeah.
The treatment of Barnum, the Master, the Doctor's sort of still quite derogatory treatment of Joe, though it does get better, but like that's still the foot we start out on. Even though it's clearly been ages since the last story, because this machine has been used several times and was set up months prior.
Yeah.
Do you know? So, like, technically speaking, it's been like possibly several weeks, if not months, since Autons.
Yeah.
And he's still treating Joe like shit. And the story as a whole was grand. I think they split themselves a bit too thin in trying to have the international espionage piece and then the creature mind control piece. I think they spread themselves too thinly trying to do both.
The story, like if they wanted to do something like that, they should have gone with potentially 8, like Deliberate Invasion, where you had the 4 was the build up and all the secrecy going around with Vaughn, and then 4 was okay, the Cybermen are involved.
Yeah, I think that may have been better. So for me, the story just didn't grip me. Like I said, the bits that did were the bits I didn't really like. So I gave it a 3. Was it better than last week? I was more interested last week. What did I give last? I gave last week a 3.5.
You gave it 3.5, yeah.
Last week I was like, this was like at the end of episode 3. I was like, okay, cool. On to episode 5. No, 4. I've only watched 3 of these already.
Yeah.
I don't like when I have that reaction. No, it's not the worst of them by any stretch. It to me is average, which is a 3.
Yeah. In terms of supporting cast, because I think that's the thing that we've kind of started to really focus on. I think probably like ever since Moonbase, really.
Yeah.
What do you make of this week's supporting cast?
I think this week's supporting cast was good. Those that were meant to be sort of sideline, don't pay like Cosworth and stuff, were still good. I think Summers is good. Barnum, like we said, is fantastic. I thought Mailer was good for the character that he was playing. There was no one in it that I thought was not pulling their weight. Is it Invasion? Is it Web of Fear level? No. But it's solid. Yeah. Solid performances across the board.
Yeah. I think out of everyone, for me, Mailer's probably like just like the weakest of a good batch of performers. Again, because like, there was just nothing special about his character. But he did the best of what he was given. Yeah. But I think the standouts for me this week were Katie, Nick, and Neil.
Oh yeah, and like if we're including like our regulars, then yeah.
You
know,
Katie and Nick and obviously like John Levine, constantly, always John Levine.
To quote Cinema Wins, John Levine is always a win.
Yep, pretty much, absolutely. And so the Master has escaped, free to travel time and space, which is fucking terrifying, while the Doctor is still exiled on Earth with the Brigadier. I even did the eyes. So guys, join us next week when we will discuss the Doctor's next adventure in the Claws of Axos, where one interesting tidbit about this particular season is that the Master always undergoes an alias that has to do with the title Master. So we'll just see what it is. Like I think Keller is like just some Latin thing for like he who gives commands or some shit like that. So it'll be interesting to see what he's called next week.
That's an interesting tidbit. I was going to make a completely different comment that was kind of inappropriate, so I'm glad you went with that tidbit.
What were you gonna? What was your interesting? Not so like. Come on, we're after
I
dark
wouldn't
here.
mind being exiled with the Brigadier.
Especially if it leads to the revelation that like Liz is living in his cottage or something.
Yeah, I can. I wouldn't mind living in that. That's absolutely fine.
And on that not so unsurprising bombshell, we shall go. We shall bid you adieu to next week. So, bye.
Bye.